Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Trends Talk. I'm Sarah Sladek, your host. I'm so glad you're here. I am joined in studio by Erin Mance. And Erin and I have known each other for a really long time, but I haven't had the opportunity to sit down and just hash it out with her. And so I'm so excited because I've followed her career for quite some time. Erin has worked for some amazing companies, and she's an expert on employee engagement. And she also does a lot with demographics, which we'll get into today as well. So, Erin, welcome to Trends Talk.
Thank you. Great to be here,
Yes, so
Sarah.
glad you're here.
Thanks for having
And
me.
you know how this goes. We're going to do 5 rounds of questions. We're putting Erin on the hot seat. So get ready. Here we go. It's question 1, round 1. What current stat or data point best summarizes the need for employers to prioritize employee engagement here and now? Erin, what do you think?
That is quite a question lately. I mean, where can I begin? The studies are constantly coming out about everything from happiness to loneliness to disconnection in the workplace to all the generations. But I think one thing that really struck me just a couple of weeks ago, Gallup just came out with their State of the Workplace Global Report. And it really showed that being actively disengaged at work is equivalent or worse than being unemployed. So that really struck me as far as just how much of an impact work can have on your overall life, that a job is not just a job, perhaps anymore, I would add.
Right. And Gallup started studying employee engagement like in the year 2000. It's good old Gallup. I refer to their stats often in my presentations because it's always really alarming to see that employee engagement isn't actually very high. It hasn't really changed since the year 2000. And employee disengagement, active disengagement, isn't far behind. So we have a lot of people in the workplace that aren't super excited to be there, and a lot of people who are really toxic. What do you chalk that up to?
Well, there's a lot of factors. I mean, I almost like to say it's the perfect storm. Everybody likes to kind of go back to the pandemic and say, well, a lot of the problems really started then because people weren't having in-person connections. I mean, I think there's a lot of different elements coming together. I mean, one is everyone's adjusting to the hybrid world, whatever kind of balance that is, right? You also have all the generations in the workforce, which I know we're going to get into a bit, which have different ways of communicating, different priorities and philosophies about everything from kind of mental health to adaptability. And then you also have this rising contingency of middle managers who are really feeling very disconnected from both their leaders and often the organization. And we'll get into that a little bit too. But managers are, beyond the point of burnout. They are really relied upon by their teams and they need more support.
Yeah. Okay. So those middle managers, I'm guessing, fall into Gen X, which brings me to my second question, round 2. All right. So you are the founder of Gen X Girls Grow Up. In fact, I brought my hat that Erin had sent to me.
Oh, the famous hat. I love
it.
Thank you.
I'm a Gen X girl. Wearing it with pride. Okay, so a whole new demographic. Gen X have moved into leadership roles.
Yeah.
So different from the baby boomers who were the majority of the workforce in leadership for 34 years. I mean, good grief, right? So we got used to certain practices and methodologies and traditions, and then bam, Gen X comes into the fold.
Yeah.
How are they changing work environments?
Well, of course, as a Gen X girl, I like to think we're making them even better. But to be a little bit more specific, Gen X is known for a lot of things, but I think a lot of traits that are common, we're very resourceful, pragmatic, and resilient. And I think we grew up that way. It's what we know. And now we're bringing that into the workplace. So I think with the rising tide of all of these changes in the workplace landscape and all of the challenges that come with the different generations working together, it's a lot of change. And I think we are like perfectly positioned, we being Gen X, to help manage that change. Change management as a work stream is taking off at companies all over the world, along with internal comms. But I think Gen X is really capable and ready to be the leaders through that change. And also, we're not as fearful of it most of the time. And I think lastly, I would say we're also really well positioned to interpret and absorb information from those younger than us and also from above, from the boomers. So we kind of act as the bridge between. We can kind of stay open, I think, to all the perspectives. We remember the world without the internet, but we learned, and we're still adapting to all the technology. But again, we're adaptable, so we get it. We get it, and we take it very seriously, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're the Jan Brady's. We're sandwiched between Marsha, and Cindy, and there's people who are tuning in that are like, "What are you even talking about?" But
well,
yes.
that is scary. Yes, and we like to sometimes say, "Well, we're the forgotten middle child," and apologies to all the middle children out there. But there are often articles coming out day to day where we're not even mentioned. And it's funny. And we talk about that on social media. Like, well, I guess they didn't mention us. And I think once even like a major network newscast didn't mention us in a study finding. We're just gone.
Right. Yeah. So those who are tuning in and they aren't familiar with Gen X Girls Grow Up, tell our audience a little bit about that.
Sure. So I started Gen X Girls Grow Up about 4 years ago. I felt like there was a need for an online community for specifically Gen X women to kind of come together and have fun, celebrate pop culture, talk about nostalgia. So it's a lot of our pop culture memories. And we have a big community growing quickly on Facebook. So I would encourage any Gen Xer out there to check it out. And again, it's really designed to be fun. Sometimes we do little Gen X childhood checklists. We talk about movies that come out. Bratz just came out for those fans of the Brat Pack. That came out on Hulu. So we've talked a lot about that. But it's really just kind of designed to be a fun part of the day and make you smile and laugh.
Yeah, the Bratz thing, it's kind of dishy, kind of good.
Very
good. And is there a specific topic, as you've done this Gen X Girls Grow Up, and speaking of women in the workforce and employee engagement, is there a specific topic that has surfaced or that you're just well aware of that people are talking about in terms of women, leadership, employee engagement, all the things?
Yeah, I think I kind of want to take that as a two-parter, if that's okay. So on the Gen X Girls Grow Up side, the one thing that is the most popular and brings everyone together from all over the country is anything related to music. That seems to resonate really strongly. On more of the kind of work and professional front, I think the one thing that keeps coming through is, Gen X is very aware that there are all these generations in the workplace, right? And so we see that coming to life a lot with communication styles. So we have to kind of think twice or maybe think a little more thoughtfully about whether we're putting punctuation at the end of a sentence. For other generations who may react, think a period is very harsh, when in our mind, like, it's just a period. And, we were learned, don't leave that period off in school, right? Because that's not right. Or picking up the phone to call someone. Like, not everyone does that. And some people may be in a panic if you call them out of the blue. Right. So it's about communication styles and adapting, I think, and being aware.
I love what you just said about the period. Who knew that was going to be so controversial? When I text people, I put periods in it. And my Gen Z children are like, Mom, you sound so serious and so harsh whenever you put a period at the end of a sentence. But that's proper grammar. So,
right. It's rethinking like all the rules that we grew up with. But, I think some we are tied to, and that in our minds, it's right and it's fine and it's good.
Yeah. So that comes right back to that adaptability and some of those changes we're seeing in how Gen X leaders are having to lead during a time of tremendous change as new young generations are coming into the fold and new technology and just disruption, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's go to round 3.
Sounds good.
Woo-hoo! All right. Next question. What roles do innovation and purpose play in an organization's ability to engage employees? So you've worked with a lot of really amazing companies. I'd love for you to share with our audience a little bit about your career thus far, and what you've observed as what's really, what's working. How does innovation purpose come into play?
Sure. Well, and I'll try to kind of do this in a nutshell, but I began my career at AOL. Hopefully most people listening know what that is. Still have my AOL email address proudly. And when I go into like check out somewhere at Banana Republic or something, they're like, what's your email address? And I say, and they go, what is it? Like they don't know. But I will say that really set a really high standard for kind of, being excited and proud of where you work, being in a fast-paced industry, attachment and connection to innovation and the brand. I mean, we were kind of paving the way for the internet. And I would say, companies, a lot of e-commerce companies were just starting out and they had to literally like sign an agreement with AOL and get a press release to really take off. And that really began kind of a trajectory. Spent some time always in internal comms for the most part in Lockheed Martin, Amazon, Meta, which brings me to my role now at Zeno Group. We're an integrated communications agency, and I'm part of the growing employee engagement practice there. And it's just so exciting to be in this environment because I think it's bringing a lot of former in-house folks like myself together to really help clients with their internal communications. And so we've kind of sat in their shoes. We know the challenges and opportunities and the climates that can arise. But I also want to address your earlier point about purpose. Again, studies are coming out constantly. One that I know really resonated with folks recently, I think it was Deloitte, just had nearly 9 in 10 Gen Zs and like 89% of millennials say having a sense of purpose at work is key to their job satisfaction. So that's really critical. So one of the things we're looking at in the employee engagement practice, and that I would urge a lot of internal communicators to do, is make sure you are tying and communicating your purpose in communications. It starts with, the employer branding side and potential candidates, and it goes to your current employees and retention and making sure that you are tying things back to that sense of purpose and then giving folks a voice to either support that, whether it's in the community or through volunteerism. But it has to be very prominent and it has to be very transparent.
Yeah. So we've heard so much about purpose, lately, and transparency, and again, these types of words and phrases that just weren't even part of work environments 10, 15 years ago. And do you think that in part is a result of Gen X coming into leadership? Do you think it's technology? Do you think what factors are driving that call for purpose?
I mean, I think it's a lot of the younger generations and the Gen Zs who are, have always grown up with that top of mind, and are, forcing employers to look at and take seriously that commitment to purpose. They have that commitment to purpose in the brands that they buy and follow, in the companies that they consider shopping from, and it's going into the workplace as well. And I think communicators just need to meet that need. Or get left behind and really potentially lose out on some really good talent and real loyalty from good employees.
Right. I remember seeing a stat about 10 years ago that millennials were making like 80% of their purchasing decisions based on a company's commitment to cause. And that was just, whoa, at that time. And yes, Gen Z is taking it to a whole nother level. And it's really just very interesting to reflect on how quickly things have changed in our work.
Absolutely. Well, when I saw you, I was almost laughing too with the question, because I was thinking, well, I don't think, decades ago when Gen X was kind of coming up in the work world, I don't think anyone even asked us about how important purpose was.
No.
They didn't care, and they wasn't asked. And so it was what it was. Again, Gen Z and millennials, their voice is changing the landscape of things.
Oh, absolutely. But I'd like to think that for Gen X, we paved the way, right? Because our generation was the first to at least begin raising our hands and saying, wait a minute, what about work-life balance? We do have lives and kids, outside of work, and we need to be thinking about some of these things and making the workplace more, inclusive, thinking about putting people first. And I'd like to think we started to pave the way towards that purpose.
I would agree with you. I would
Okay,
definitely
all
agree
right.
with you. And I think a lot of my coworkers and friends and former coworkers that are all part of Gen X would absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we go to the next question, I do want to ask you and just reflect on the amazing companies you just shared that you've worked for. And I know there are people out there that are like, dang, girl, how did you work for so many, how'd you get your foot in the door at so many amazing corporations? And I'm just curious, what do you think set you apart? How did you intentionally say, I'm going to have this amazing career for all these amazing companies? Or did it just kind of happen? What's
It
your
might be a
story there?
little of both. I don't know if I've ever thought it through that well. I think it was a little of both. I mean, I think a lot of it comes back to too, I'm a writer at heart. And so I'm always looking at things from different angles and honing in on kind of what might be important or to someone or resonate with someone. And I believe, that kind of carries through to interpersonal relationships too. And it's just like showing what value you can bring to an organization and making sure that that organization is the right fit for you. It could be the biggest company in the world, but if it's not the right culture or fit for you, if the people aren't the right fit for you, consider other options. I've been very lucky, I think, in my career and worked with some great people along the way.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I'm kind of jealous, I gotta say. Really cool work experiences. All right, next question. Let's get around 4. All right, what are 3 steps employers can take to immediately transition their cultures and boost employee engagement? This is your area of expertise, Erin.
Yes, I love the question. And I love like the 3 immediates because there are so many things to do. It can almost be overwhelming. And we're seeing this a lot and we're advising a lot of clients on this too. Number 1, I think help your managers be strong communicators. We talked about this earlier and people are seeing this all over the press. Middle managers are burnt out, but it's way beyond that. Middle managers have the ability to really keep their teams engaged and connected. Zeno Group, where I am, we did our own study last year, really digging into middle managers, kind of what's making them tick. Are they getting the support they need? Where does internal communications come in? And we found that companies and leaders are actually failing middle managers. So 74% of senior leaders thought that they are adequately equipping managers, but only 43% of middle managers felt supported by senior leaders, right? And company communications weren't even filling the gap. Like a quarter of managers said that's not doing it. So helping managers be strong communicators, whether it's training, whether it's giving them really concise talking points, right? Letting them know that things are coming. So giving them a heads up, even if it's, an hour before, but really helping them help their teams because they want to be strong communicators, and Gen X managers really want to be strong communicators, but they need information and they need support. And so things have to change there.
Yeah.
And I would say the other thing is employee listening programs. So that would be the second thing I'd recommend, giving employees a voice. And this can take many forms. It could be a survey. It can be an engagement survey. Just make sure to take action on the survey findings so that you're reassuring employees, hey, we are listening and we're doing something about it. And also addressing the generations head on is another thing I would do, which would be the third thing. So, standing up employee advisory committees or like a multi-generational task force, teaming people up on teams. I mean, there's real value from having a team or a cross-functional team with folks from different generations. It is, I've seen it firsthand. It's really valuable to get those different perspectives, especially too when it comes to wording and interpretation and language.
Oh my gosh. Yes. You are preaching what I preach. I love that.
Yeah.
Cognitive diversity is so incredibly important.
It really is.
And you mentioned something really key here, communicating with teams. And I think we have to just pause and remind ourselves that we are, and again, Gen X being the leaders at this time, moving into leadership. It's a new era for a multitude of reasons. But one of the things that is really fascinating to think about is that we're really the first to have to be masters at teamwork. And the fact is, we haven't ever been taught how to effectively lead teams or team build it. Our workplaces have always been very hierarchical. And so, senior leaders would say, well, do what I say, and this is
Right.
your job, and don't
Yeah.
question authority. Well, wow, things have changed in recent years. And now the Gen Xers are being pushed out of, in some cases, their comfort zones to think a little bit differently, lead a little bit differently, be very team oriented, people first. And, it can be very, very challenging.
Yes, yes, it can. But again, going back to some of those Gen X traits, I think we're well positioned to do that. I mean, you talk a lot about resilience. You hear that a lot. We're used to pivoting. We're used to figuring it out. We're very resourceful. A lot of us came home with like the key around our neck and like fixed our own snacks and, played whatever we recorded on the VCR. Our parents were working. We ran around the neighborhood till dark. I mean, I could go on, but we really are used to kind of navigating our way through. And this is no different. So, I mean, I think I take a lot of pride, and I know that a lot of the Gen X girls, grow up followers take a lot of pride in those traits. And it does set us apart. And I think it will help everyone in the work world.
Yeah. I want to just add something to that too,
Sure.
because one other little trend I'm noticing, and again, when we talk about trends, a lot of times the focus is on the younger generations, but definitely we have to pay attention to some of those leadership changes that are happening in those trends. But something I'm observing is just a sense of almost anger. Especially among some of these Gen X women who are trying to move into leadership or even have moved into leadership, and they're feeling really frustrated because they're running into hurdles or obstacles or discrimination even yet today. And they're being very vocal about it. Any thoughts on that? And are you seeing the same?
So, I'm seeing some frustrations. Maybe that's the best way I would describe it. Frustrations from, a lot of Gen X women who did kind of put the decades and time into their careers, who maybe, didn't have the benefit. Well, some would say this is a benefit of work from home parenting, who had to get dressed and go to that office through the commute 5 days a week. Right. And so I think there's a little bit of like, we put in our time and there should be, we didn't have that work-life balance. Right. It's great that, new generations are having that more now. But that, it's time for Gen X to step up. At the same time, I know there are still, baby boomers who have a lot to offer in the workforce. So again, we're kind of stuck in between. We're kind of waiting. We're always kind of waiting. And I think we're still waiting a bit. But I think, again, just to keep learning from folks younger and older is so important. And to know kind of what you value and to know, what is a good match. I think coming up with Gen Z again, like they know, and they will pursue those careers and jobs and companies that they feel are aligned to their purpose, their interests, and their skills.
Most definitely. Yeah. Yes. So much to learn. Okay. Fantastic. Last question, round 5. Let's do it. Okay. What trends, Erin, are you currently watching and advising others to prepare for? Because this is Trends Talk after all. So I'm curious, what trends are you observing?
This is Trends Talk for sure. So, in the employee engagement space, I'm going to come back again to the generation. So keeping an eye on those generations in the workplace and some of the, optional solutions I mentioned earlier. Also, we're seeing a big focus and need for measurement and metrics and data-driven decisions when it comes to internal communications, right? So it's often a little bit easier to measure on the external comm side for all our PR folks out there. But we're seeing internal communicators really needing to demonstrate to their leadership the impact that they're making with communications. Are they getting through to employees? What's getting through to employees, right? And based on some of the data that they can collect and metrics, how does that help them kind of prioritize content or take a deck to leadership and say, we move the needle on this, which is tied to the business goals. So we're helping internal communicators really dive into that data. A lot of communicators are wordsmiths and writers like me and don't love numbers, but it's a necessary component now to kind of show your impact and also help you work smarter. Making content work harder is something I think will continue. So when things are created for one medium, it can go across a lot of others, right? So making sure that folks are amplifying content across social, across internal channels, across external. Obviously, some are, sensitive, need to stay internal, but there's a lot of content that can be working harder. And I would just say too, and I've seen this a lot recently, including at a conference, that there is a bigger interest, I feel like, than ever, and a need for different departments to work together. So HR needs internal comms. Internal comms needs HR. And same with marketing and PR. Everybody needs to work together because HR has kind of a piece of the pie when it comes to employee experience too, as does internal comms. So really collaborating well internally, I think, is more important than ever. And that's also a skill I think Gen X is poised to deliver on, right? Working with all kinds of people.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I love that. Yes. And, that data piece, as long as we're talking about generations, I'm hearing this more and more that Gen Z wants to be able to see in the workplace. Are you doing more than just talking the talk? Can you actually walk the walk? We want to see those metrics. We want to see measurable progress. We want to see the goals. And we also want to see how we're doing, how we're performing as employees. So I think that data-driven piece is so incredibly important. So we do have an audience question.
Okay.
How can organizations measure and analyze employee engagement effectively? What a great question.
That is a great question. And it's something we hear a lot. And again, it's challenging. So there are a number of ways. I mean, there's a lot of choices, internal communicators have and companies have. It can be something as simple, for those technology kind of phobic folks, as looking at your email platform and seeing what metrics are available. Simple things like open rate, click rate, subject line testing, kind of start small, start from there. And then you can go, to much more sophisticated support like employee engagement apps and platforms that literally measure and encourage kind of two-way communication as well. So companies like Staffbase, who provide these employer engagement apps, it also connects folks wherever they are. So what I love about that is it connects employees together online. And we talked earlier about this loneliness epidemic in the workplace. It helps. It's one step. Yes, it's online, but it's one step in the process. But the apps have really rich engagement metrics that help you make informed decisions. And again, kind of double down on content that's working. So those are just some ways. I also spent some time doing wellness programs for companies, and we did a lot of, I mentioned subject line testing earlier. So email is still alive and well. So I would say, again, folks that have email, double down on that. If you have Slack, there are really rich metrics built into Slack. If you're putting time into producing videos, look at your platforms, see if you can see metrics that show when people are dropping off. If everyone's dropping off at the 60-second mark, maybe make a shorter video and don't put all your resources into a 10-minute video.
Yeah, exactly. And I would add, asking people if they feel that sense of belonging, and ask people if they're having fun, doing some of those surveys, polls, just to gather information. Before we go, we have 1 minute left, but there's one more quick question from our audience. Why do you think Gen X is not part of data reporting?
People just forget us. Maybe we are a small generation. So we are, I think, don't quote, maybe 65 million, but we're smaller than millennials. There you go. We're smaller. So we are forgotten. And sometimes we like to kind of stay a little bit off the radar, honestly. So part of that onus may be on us.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we got to show up, right? We got to show up. We got to do our part. We got to raise our voice.
That's right.
And I'm so glad you're here. I'm going to put my hat back on to say goodbye to Erin.
I love it.
Yes, yes, I am a Gen X girl. Oh yeah, I'm so proud. Erin, it was fantastic talking with you today about employee engagement and your amazing career and all that you've accomplished. And thank you for sharing some valuable insights on employee engagement. Thanks for tuning in for Trends Talk. We'll see you next month. I'm Sarah.